This is the story of how the GAO deceived Congress and opened the way for horse slaughter to return to America. In 2007, Congress removed funding for horse slaughter inspections, effectively banning slaughter in the United States. In 2011, the GAO released report number 11-228. This report was supposed to address horse welfare in the wake of the plant closings. The GAO first admitted and then denied that it had leaked the report to Charles Stenholm, a lobbyist for the horse slaughter industry, 6 full months before its release. In the first paragraph of the report, the GAO admits that there was no reduction in horse slaughter. The horses were simply sent to Canada and Mexico instead of being slaughtered in the United States. Since only the destination of the horses changed, other than a slightly longer trip, there can have been no real impact on horse welfare. Yet GAO Report 11-228 dedicates 60 pages of every kind of deceit and misinformation to prove the opposite. In the very first paragraph of the report, the GAO claims the horse prices have been impacted negatively by up to 8 to 21% because of the closing of the domestic plants. But Congress directed the GAO to study horse welfare, not horse prices. Halfway through, the report attempts to link horse prices with welfare, saying veterinarians, noting that people are more inclined to take care of that which has value, said that the drop in horse prices affected some owners' interest in caring for their animals. The report is packed with the unsubstantiated opinions of anonymous veterinarians. Paragraph 2 of the report begins, comprehensive national data are lacking, but state, local government, and animal welfare organizations report a rise in investigations for horse neglect and abandonment since 2007. It then says, for example, Colorado data show the investigations for horse neglect and abuse increased more than 60% from 975 in 2005 to 1,588 in 2009. Did you catch the switch? The example was supposed to be about what happened after the domestic horse slaughter plants closed. But why did they pick 2005 when the plants closed in 2007? And why did they pick 2009 when they had data available through 2010? This bait and switch was clearly intended to deceive the reader, and it worked perfectly with the press. The Associated Press reported, in Colorado, the GAO report states investigations for abuse and neglect increased 60% after horse slaughter was banned domestically. That, of course, is not what those dates indicate. If the GAO had shown the data from Colorado, their deceit would have been obvious. By using the wrong dates and hiding the actual data, the GAO was able to deceive the reader into believing that equine abuse and neglect was continuing to increase when it had been decreasing for 2 years. In fact, the actual cause of the increase in abuse and neglect was a spike in hay prices. And remember the statement about lacking national data? We were easily able to find data from 6 states. 5 of them reported a decrease in abuse and neglect in the last 2 years of the reporting period. Nowhere was abuse and neglect increasing as reported by the GAO. So given data that contradicted their desired findings, the GAO switched the subject from horse welfare to horse prices. But even here they had to cook the books, because there was no way, with horse slaughter being constant, that the destination of the horses could have any impact whatever on the pricing. Kill buyers didn't get the horses cheaper because they had long trips. They got them cheaper because no one was bidding against them at the auctions. To understand this, we have to do the analysis that the GAO was supposed to have done. Beginning in 2005, ethanol production began to soar, demanding more and more corn. This, in turn, caused land use changes, which reduced the amount of alfalfa and hay being grown. In 2007 and 2008, a drought gripped much of the country, including the entire southeast. This, in turn, put enormous pressure on the already slim hay supply. Hay prices soared, and many horse owners were unable to properly feed their horses, much less buy new ones. So how did the GAO make those very precise calculations about horse prices? Nowhere in the report does the GAO even mention hay prices. The report took only 2 possible causes into consideration: the closing of the domestic plants and the rate of unemployment. But a peer-reviewed study published in the Kentucky Journal of Equine, Agricultural, and Natural Resources Law documented other pressures on horse owners, including the price of hay, alfalfa, corn, and fuel. All of these spiked during the period of the report. And what variable did the GAO use to represent the end of domestic slaughter? Clearly, it had to be what is called a dummy variable, since the real number, the number of horses slaughtered, remained unchanged. Such calculations are essentially meaningless. For example, the same results would have been obtained if, instead of the closing of the domestic slaughter plants, the dummy variable had represented the collapse of Lehman Brothers, or the party occupying the White House. In fact, a statistical correlation study available on the EWA website found unemployment plays a relatively small role in abuse and neglect compared to that of the price of hay. The report quotes anonymous officials 86 times and anonymous veterinarians 33 times, but none of these quotes contains any suggestion that the cost and availability of hay might be important to equine welfare. So the GAO did not even test the right parameter. To determine just how the GAO had performed this analytical fraud, we requested the data and calculations under the Freedom of Information Act. The request was denied, citing congressional immunity from the FOIA Act. Paragraph 2 also demonstrates the word games that are played throughout the report. It says state, local, tribal, and horse industry officials generally attribute these increases in neglect and abandonments to cessation of domestic slaughter and the economic downturn. It then continues. Others, including representatives from some animal welfare organizations, question the relevance of cessation of slaughter to these problems. Notice the people that agree with the GAO's conclusions are officials, while those who disagree are just representatives. And notice that the phrase cessation of domestic slaughter morphs into just cessation of slaughter. There are also less subtle falsehoods in the report. On page 15, it describes the Cavell plant in Illinois as having been closed for 2 years as the result of a fire set by anti-slaughter activists. In fact, the source of the fire was never determined and no arson was indicated. Just months after GAO Report 11-228 was issued, it was successfully used to persuade the Senate not to include defunding language in its version of the agriculture budget. The House version did contain defunding language, but in conference committee the language was dropped from the bill by a 3-1 vote. And who were the members of the conference committee who made it possible for slaughter to return? They were Senators Cole, Blunt, and Congressman Kingston. Yes, these are the very same men who requested the GAO's study be performed in the first place. And if you recognize the names Blunt and Kingston, it may be because these were the two men responsible for the notorious Monsanto Protection Act. So, to summarize, in just the first 2 paragraphs of Report GAO 11-228, we have seen that the GAO had data that showed equine abuse was declining and misrepresented it as showing it was increasing. We also saw that they were unaware of or ignored the true factors causing neglect and instead performed meaningless analysis that tested the wrong variables in the wrong way. The reason for the report's reliance on the supposed opinions of anonymous veterinarians is now obvious. All the available data contradicted their preordained findings. Were it not for the distortion of the Colorado data, the report might merely have been deemed incompetent. But knowing the GAO had at least some of the ample evidence that contradicted their findings, we have to rate this report as a fraud.